Everyone wants to be financially free, but very few people want to be extremely frugal. And honestly, I get it. I personally don't mind being frugal because I know it will be the reason that I reach financial freedom before I turn 30 years old. But to keep my expenses as low as possible, I'm living with 3 roommates, I cook all of my own meals, and I don't own a car. Again, that's worth it for me. But it is not the lifestyle that I recommend for everyone. But the good news is that you don't have to be as frugal as me to retire early. Sure, you probably won't be able to retire before you turn 30 years old without being pretty frugal. But in this video, I'm going to explain how you could use what I call the 30% rule to retire faster than 98% of people without being frugal. And I'll explain one strategy that you could use to retire on less than $500,000 while still living an extremely comfortable lifestyle. That last strategy might sound too good to be true right now, but I promise it's not. If you stick around until the end, it will all make sense. But even without using that strategy, it is still possible to retire faster than 98% of people without being that frugal. And that's because 98% of people are still working into their 50s, their 60s, or sometimes even their 70s. But if you used the 30% rule, you could probably retire in your 40s. But to understand the 30% rule, you have to understand something else first. Retirement is like going on a road trip. If you drive a real gas-guzzling car, you're going to need a full gas tank to make it to your destination. And in the same way, if you spend a ton of money every year, you're going to have to save up a huge amount of money to make it through retirement before all of your savings run out. But if you drive an efficient car that gets a lot of miles per gallon, then you'll need a lot less fuel to make it the same distance. And that's why people who spend less money need so much less money to retire. They just aren't burning through their savings that quickly. The rule of thumb is that you need about 25 times your annual expenses to retire. So if you spend $100,000 per year, you'd want to save about $2.5 million. But if you want to spend $1 million per year, you'd want $25 million to retire. And by the way, I created a whole guide on how to calculate exactly how much money you need before you retire early, and a few things you should be aware of so you don't run out of money. And that's in the video description, so make sure to grab it. But the main point is, everyone needs a different amount of money before they can retire. What this means is that 2 people could have the exact same net worth, and they could even be saving the exact same amount of money every year. But if one of these people spends way less money than the other, they might be able to retire literally decades faster than the other. And that's why there is one number that I think everybody should know, which is their savings rate. Your savings rate is just the percentage of your income that you save. It's just the amount of money you save every year divided by your after-tax income. This number is really important because you can use this number to calculate when you'll reach financial freedom. Think about it this way. Let's say person A earns $95,000 per year after tax and saves $25,000 per year. Person B earns $60,000 after tax and saves $18,000 per year. Now let me ask you, which of these people will be able to retire early faster? Well, person A has a savings rate of 26%. Person B saves less money overall, but their savings rate is 30%. So even though person A is saving more money every year, person B will be able to retire faster. That's because person A is spending $70,000 per year. So using the rule of thumb, they would want about $1.75 million before they retired. But person B only spends $42,000 per year. So they would only need about $1.05 million to retire. So yeah, they save less, but they need a whole lot less to retire. So it's your savings rate that tells you when you're on track to retire. But just how long would it take to retire early? Well, no matter how much money you earn or how much money you save, 2 people with the same savings rate should reach financial freedom at the same time. And I hope this makes sense if you think about it. If one person saves 30% of their $1 million income, and another person saves 30% of their $50,000 per year income, then they'll both reach financial freedom at the same time. It's just that one will be spending a lot more than the other. And there's actually an online calculator that lets you play around with the numbers for yourself. This year, I'm targeting a savings rate of over 80%. That means I should be able to retire after about 6 years of working, which is the plan. Of course, that might happen a little faster if you smash the like and subscribe button. But again, you would either have to be extremely frugal or make a ton of money to have an 80% savings rate. And this is where the 30% rule comes from. You don't have to be extremely frugal. If you save just 30% of your income, you should be financially independent in about 24 years, assuming a 7% return on investment. Start in your early 20s and you would be financially free by your mid to late 40s. You'd be able to retire faster than 98% of people. And most people would not have to be that frugal to save 30% of their income. And to prove it to you, I want to run through an example of how an average person could use the 30% rule without being extremely frugal. The average US household makes about $60,000 per year per person after taxes. To save 30% of that, that means you would have to live on $42,000 per year as a single person or $84,000 as a couple. In the US, the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment is about $1,200 a month. Even after $8,000 for transportation, $5,000 for food, and $4,000 for healthcare, you would still have $10,600 left over to spend on clothes, entertainment, and everything else you want to buy. That's a pretty sweet life. And for a couple, it could be even easier since you could combine on rent. And all of that is still way more money than I spend, even though I live in an area that is twice as expensive as the national average. But by living with roommates, not owning a car, and not eating out, I only spend about $20,000 per year. So it really is possible to retire early without being that frugal. If you use the 30% rule, you could retire early in your 40s. But at the end of the day, spending less money will always be a powerful way to retire faster. Because again, how much money you need to save for retirement depends on how much money you spend. So if you don't spend a lot, then one, you'll be saving way more money, and two, you won't need to save as much money to be financially free. If you save 10% of your income, it would take over 40 years to reach financial freedom. And this is what most people do. But imagine how easy it would be to retire early if you saved 90% of your income. You'd be saving 9 times your income every year, so you would be financially free in just 2.5 years. So the more frugal you are, the easier it will be to retire early. But there is one strategy you could use to retire early extremely comfortably on less than $500,000. And while this strategy is extremely powerful, less than 5% of people use it. Here's the thing. A lot of retirement calculations assume that you'll spend the same amount of money in retirement as you do while you're working. But this might not be the case. When you're planning for retirement, it doesn't actually matter what you spend right now. What actually matters is that you save enough money to support your post-retirement lifestyle. And this is really important. Because when I just showed you that you could retire in 24 years using the 30% rule, I assumed that your expenses were the same both before and after retirement. But what if you could spend half as much money after retiring? Then you could retire years faster, maybe even in your 30s. Of course, the obvious question is,
how the heck do I spend half as much money after retiring?
And the answer is by moving. I mentioned earlier that I live in a very expensive area. Near Washington, D.C., the average rent is around $3,000 per month, but the national average is closer to $1,200 per month. So just moving to a cheaper city could make it possible to retire on so much less. But even that wouldn't be enough to retire on less than $500,000, at least not without living extremely frugally. And that's why a much more powerful strategy is to move countries, like say to Portugal or to Thailand. In a country like Thailand, $20,000 per year is more than enough to live a very comfortable lifestyle even in the most expensive cities. That means you could easily retire in Thailand on less than $500,000 while still living like royalty. So let's take our example of the average US person again. If they saved 30% of their $60,000 per year income, then they'd be saving about $1,500 per month. That would be enough to retire to Thailand in just 16 years, assuming a 7% return on investment. Start at 20 and you would be financially free at 36. So even without being that frugal, it is still possible to retire in your 30s and still live a very comfortable lifestyle. So I want to close with this message because it's something that I wish somebody had told me when I was younger. You don't have to spend your entire life working 8 hours a day in a job that you don't love. Even regular people can retire early, and you wouldn't have to make huge sacrifices to do it. You can still live a very comfortable lifestyle and reach financial freedom. You don't have to choose one or the other. No matter what, it is very important that you know how much money you need before you're financially free. And that's why you need to watch this video next. Because in this video, I'll explain how to calculate how much money you need to save in the next year if you want to retire early.